Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Getting ready for the Deep South's oldest rivalry again tomorrow, renewing that great one. At least it's been great for Georgia as of late. Last few years, certainly. Big preview of all of that today, plus Jeff Sentell to talk some UGA recruiting and final thoughts on big games around the SEC and across college football. We're really reaching deeper into the season. Georgia, believe it or not, be at the halfway point of the regular season once Saturday concludes. So we're going to talk about all of that today. We know the history, we know the pageantry, we know the meaning and significance of this rivalry game, and we hope, with all hope, that Georgia can extend what has been a really fun and impressive winning streak over the course of these last few years. And today on the show, we're going to do our part to talk about exactly how that can happen. So we are happy to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
The Deep South's oldest rivalry. A matchup that's been making headlines since 1892. From 8,000 watching at Piedmont Park to 39 battles in Columbus.
Frank Sinkwich, Georgia's record-breaking ground gainer.
The names: Frank Sinkwich,
Bulldogs celebrating as we whipped Auburn by the score.
Vince Dooley, Herschel Walker.
And Auburn has been stopped at the 42.
The iconic moments: sugar falling out of the sky.
Now the fire hoses are coming out.
Between the hoses.
And time runs out on Auburn.
Old Lady Luck.
And he almost gets bit by Uga.
The images. 65 Bulldog victories.
In their black jerseys.
And some write themselves.
There you go. There's the headline tomorrow.
In a new age of college football, this tradition matters. And so do the storylines yet to be written.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Another outstanding video compilation put together there by Cody Chaffins. Obviously, you cannot think about Georgia and Auburn without thinking of the history of this game. We talked about some of that yesterday, the memorable moment from 1986. In fact, we'll have a little bit more of Georgia fan reaction to that before we're done on the show here today. This is just what it is when it's the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Of course, those of us who've been around it for a few years, we're going to have some memories of it, and it's great to conjure those back up as you get ready for Saturday. I will say, too, as we get going here today on a Friday, that of all of the Georgia-Auburn games in recent years, and it's been a recent run of dominance for Georgia, of course, but of all of these Georgia-Auburn games in recent years, the lead up to this one feels a little weirder than others do. I think there's a weird vibe around this game from Saturday. I think that weirdness is mostly coming from the Auburn side. I do think it draws a contrast with what's also happening here on the Georgia side, too. I just think there's just a little bit of weirdness in the air here right now that leaves me wondering, well, how will this impact, or what will we really see on the field on Saturday? I think it's a little bit difficult to know. But to kick things off today, in light of what may be a weird vibe for a long-time historic rivalry, let's talk about one thing that hasn't really changed. Let's talk about one thing that's just as true as ever. Apparently, obviously, the catchphrase for Georgia here this year: fire, passion, and energy. Players need to have it, and if players are going to have it, coaches have to demonstrate it. They have to model it. They have to show what it's all about. You're probably not surprised to know that we have evidence that Kirby Smart remains maybe just as fiery as he ever was. Maybe you've seen this on whatever social media platform you prefer. You know, if you're ever walking around the Athens campus, Kirby coaches from a microphone. Sometimes people hear what's said. Sometimes people have a tendency to want to record what's said, and we get a little bit of a brief taste, even though practice at Georgia is is closed, we get a brief taste of just how fiery and how passionate Kirby Smart can be. In fact, evidence of that, we guess from this week. We can't confirm that for sure, but seems to be maybe from this week. Kirby asking a question that's on the mind of a lot of Georgia fans right now. We're told that this is from Georgia practice. It's all over the internet. It's from this week. Take a look at this.
What the f are we doing on defense? Reload, reload, reload. Are we knocking it? Are we moving it? Let's go, reload.
What in the blank are we doing on defense? Kirby Smart allegedly asks at Georgia practice this week. And for a lot of Georgia fans, they're wondering, yeah, exactly what is going on with the Georgia defense here right now. Maybe you take some comfort in knowing that Kirby Smart is asking the same kind of questions of himself, of his own defense, during Georgia practices here too. I will say that in a roundabout way, if this video really is from this week, and if Kirby Smart really is out there firing, in a very fiery manner, coaching up the defense as he often does, maybe it's a good sign in that it feels like the last time we had one of these little things escape out from Georgia practice onto the internet, it was the week before the Tennessee game in 2022. You may remember he was all over Keelin Ringo that day. Ringo would go out to have an interception against Tennessee just a couple of days after that. And so perhaps the fiery coaching from Kirby Smart during Georgia practice that week led to success of the defense on the field. And obviously, Georgia's hoping for the same thing here, too. We have been saying a lot going back to last Saturday against Kentucky that it seems like right now the Georgia offense is either better, maybe to say it in a better way, has a higher ceiling right now than the Georgia defense seems to, that this Georgia defense is just not really, at least thus far, in keeping with what traditional and typical Georgia defenses have been in the Kirby Smart era up to this point. There is time for that to change. The Auburn game on Saturday would be a great place for that to start. And of course, as you do that, or imagine in your mind how Georgia might do that, one of the things you obviously think about is what the Kirby Smart defense will look like matched up against the Hugh Freeze offense. And this is where, by the way, the weirdness of Saturday's game, I think, becomes a little bit more apparent. Smart talking earlier this week about what it means to compete against Hugh Freeze and how the viewpoint that Kirby has of Freeze's offense has evolved over time. This is Kirby from earlier this week.
Every offense kind of evolves. Every offense coordinator, they take plays that work against other people, and they use those plays. He's done the same through time. He was one of the first to really start using the RPOs. They still use those. It maximizes your skill on the perimeter, and it forces the hand of the defense to make decisions on how you want to play the run game or the RPO game, which most people think of it as a pass game, but it's really an extension of the run. They do a tremendous job of it, and it's one of the things that Hugh's really been good at for a long time.
When Kirby talks RPO there, what I think he means is obviously the classic pop pass style RPO where, you pull the ball out of the belly of the running back and you dump it over the linebacker's head. In the initial phase of the RPO world, that's what kind of transformed football. Putting those linebackers in conflict, making them think, run, and then throwing it over the top of their head. That's one of the things that Hugh Freeze made a name for himself for doing at Ole Miss. But to talk to the Auburn fans, and here's where we kind of get back to the weirdness of the Saturday's game. To talk to the Auburn fans, the classic Hugh Freeze style offense that does feature a lot of RPO, a lot of quarterback read, a lot of things like that, some of it also quarterback run. You talk to these Auburn fans, they are not happy with this Hugh Freeze offense whatsoever. And as far as the continued evolution that Smart's speaking about, what's being discussed around the Auburn program right now is not just a natural and continued evolution over the course of time, but a needed dramatic evolution, quick change for this week. And what's really, I think, compelling here is how much Freeze, oftentimes coaches don't like to play into narratives. They like to sidestep, especially things that border on criticism. They just want to block out what they call distractions. In the case of Hugh Freeze this week, some of the clips we played for you earlier this week, some of the stuff that Freeze has said throughout the week, Freeze is not really running from this right now. Hugh Freeze is pretty open about the fact that they do need to play better offensively, and that what happened, for instance, in their last game against Texas A&M, where they were somewhat competitive on the road, close final margin of victory for the Aggies, but Auburn didn't really make plays to give themselves a chance to win. As I've told you a lot this week, I think it's fascinating how contrite Hugh Freeze has spent most of this week being. At one point in time, he was asked, I guess during a Thursday media availability, if Auburn fans could expect or hope to see some offensive changes for Saturday's game against Georgia. Freeze was very short and concise with his answer, saying they better. And I just think that sets up what I think is a really weird vibe, where my official pick, if you watch Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews on the DawgNation video channels this week, despite the fact that Georgia's only a narrow favorite, they've been, about 3.5, 4 points, depending on where you've looked and when you've seen it this week. Honestly, I kind of like Auburn plus the points. I think that Georgia's win in this game could be of the 1 or 2 point variety. Would not surprise me if it's down to the wire, where Peyton Woodring has to kick a game-winning field goal or some other sort of late-game drama preserves a Georgia win. I think this is a game for Georgia where it's going to have to, on the road in a tough environment. My official prediction is that Georgia's going to have to fight for its life to make it happen and to get that done, and expect to get the best shot from Auburn. But it's important to note that while I've been saying that, and while I apparently believe that, and some Georgia fans seemingly do too, not all Georgia fans, some have been far more confident than me, but as some Georgia fans are joining me in saying, boy, I expect this to be a tough game, expect this to be hard fought. If you go and look on, like, say, the Auburn social media conversations or the message boards where Auburn fans get together, seemingly right now, they don't believe any of that. Auburn fans themselves are seemingly not giving themselves, the best that I can tell anyway, and I've looked pretty far and wide, they're not giving themselves much chance to win this game at all at the moment. In fact, if anything, they're talking about if and when they do lose, does this end up being Hugh Freeze's last game as Auburn coach? Freeze was asked about that. The Auburn athletic director, John Coleman, was asked about that. Like, this has been a topic at Auburn this week of how much job security does Hugh Freeze really have? And any chance you would think to save his job depends on doing something against Georgia on Saturday, which is going to put a lot of pressure on the Auburn quarterback, Jackson Arnold, who, by the way, has also been in the crosshairs with his fans. And you can make a case, arguably with good reason. I mean, I hate to say it this way, but it just is just about true. I mean, Jackson Arnold's been about the worst quarterback in the SEC. Statistically speaking, he's just 169.2 passing yards per game. That's basically the bottom in the league of guys who are regular starting quarterbacks of their team. Arnold has not been good. And so, once again, to bring it back to the Georgia defense, Kirby Smart and that leaked audio that we played for you earlier, what the blank are we doing on defense? I think that there are a lot of Georgia fans who have been wondering about that because Georgia hasn't quite been dominant on defense this season. But against a quarterback like Arnold, now the Georgia coaches and players won't say it this way, but it's no less true, against a quarterback like Arnold who has struggled, against an Auburn offense that has scuffled, this ought to be a time for the Georgia offense to get right. This is a time for Georgia to, if you want to think about padding stats, defensive stats-wise, to do to Auburn, albeit on the road in a hostile environment, a little bit like what it did to another struggling offense, Kentucky, last week. But to be fair, while Jackson Arnold has not thrown the ball well at all, he still brings the extra dimension of what he can do with his legs and the fact that he does have experience in the SEC. And you're probably not surprised to know that when Kirby Smart talked about this earlier this week, he found a lot more complimentary tone for Arnold than the one that I just shared. This is Kirby Smart.
First thing is his athleticism. You know, he's had 2 or 3 plays that were broken plays or, plays that maybe scramble plays, RPOs that were designed to be thrown, that maybe the look changed, and he takes off running and he runs for 60 yards. He runs for 70 yards. He doesn't just run for like 8, 9 yards and go down. I mean, he runs like a running back. He runs over you, through you, around you, speed. They run gap schemes with him. They run perimeter runs with him. And then probably the toughest thing to defend is when he drops back and he ends up taking off running. So he's a weapon, and they've got weapons around him in terms of the ability to throw the ball downfield.
So 2 things that stand out to me about that. A, you do have to respect Arnold's run game. He has been good at that. It's really about the only thing that he's done well. And while the Hugh Freeze offense the last couple of years haven't been very good either, with Peyton Thorne, who's, if anything, probably less of a quarterback than Jackson Arnold is, to be honest, they have found success against Georgia running the ball, a lot of outside run stuff, just a lot of things that put Georgia's defense in conflict. And despite the fact that Auburn really wasn't moving the football very well against many teams, they did find some quarterback run success against Georgia. And against other opponents, Georgia's also been susceptible to quarterback run. So that is a real thing that you would assume that Georgia's got to be concerned about and on guard for on Saturday. And then when Smart mentions, oh yeah, but what about when he steps back and he looks to throw it? Obviously, Auburn's got the passing game weapons that you've got to be aware of too. And this is where I think it gets back to the ongoing conversation about Auburn creating the weird vibe for the game on Saturday, and how the actual perception of Auburn with people inside their own bubble a little bit different than ours is. If I were to ask 100 Georgia fans, hey, what do you know about Auburn? I would say receivers is one of the first thing that probably comes up. Cam Coleman, we believe, may be the best receiver in the SEC. Singleton, the transfer from Tech, we know him to be a dangerous weapon too. Most of us would probably say that's Auburn at its best from a playmaking standpoint. They have really good wide receivers, and I believe that actually is the case. But Auburn fans are also expressing some frustration in that too, in that Hugh Freeze has been a little bit pass happy this year. The numbers don't suggest it because they haven't been very good, but some of the offensive frustration and struggles have come from the fact that Freeze, and even he's acknowledged this some, just seemingly can't commit himself to the running game, can't seemingly buy into, hey, you got to run the ball to win the SEC. And honestly, if you look at the overall statistics, while he's probably less famous than Singleton and certainly Cam Coleman, Jeremiah Cobb, the Auburn running back, has actually probably been Auburn's most successful player here this year. So if you were to go into one of these, breakfast counters or something like that around, Alabama, Montgomery, Auburn, Opelika, that area, and say, hey, what's it going to take for Auburn to win this game against Georgia on Saturday, or even have a chance to win the game? Because as I told you, Auburn fans don't have a ton of confidence here right now. Based on the online conversations I'm seeing, the prevailing fan wisdom seems to be, man, we got to get this running game going. We got to lean on Jeremiah Cobb a little bit. We got to trust that running game to do something. We can't be so pass happy with a quarterback that's not been all that successful. Even if we do have very good wide receivers, that's probably not the recipe against Georgia on Saturday, a lot of Auburn fans would say, which does play back, you would think, maybe into the hands of what Georgia has done well this year. If Auburn's trying to establish the run, that's a pretty interesting test for a Georgia defense that actually in that aspect of performance has been really good. Pass rush, not always great. Winning the 50, in fact, rarely being great. Winning the 50-50 balls with the deep throws like what Joey Aguilar and Tennessee were doing. Georgia had its struggles with that. But defensive-wise, I think I've got it written down here. They're, fourth best in the SEC, 82 yards per game allowed. The three teams ranked ahead of them, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, arguably all three have played easier schedules than Georgia's played. Georgia's played 3 games already against SEC teams, one of those hostile road environments. If you're only giving up 82 per game on the ground, that's probably a real number. That's probably a valid number. Thus far, that's what Georgia's been good at. That's what Auburn wants to try to establish, but that's where Georgia defensively has already established itself. So let me see if I can sum this up all this way. A word that gets thrown around a lot, and probably frankly a little bit too much, is the idea of dominant. Is there a dominant team in college football this year? Georgia's not as dominant as it once was. I think that there is a media obsession right now with the notion of dominance. And frankly, we probably do some of that too. This is not just me ripping on somebody else. This obsession with who's dominant and who's not, because we've been trained over the course of the last 10 years or so to expect to see dominance at the top of college football. And for all the reasons everyone's mentioned, maybe that just doesn't exist anymore. Maybe that to the same level it has, maybe that's just not quite as much of a thing as it once was. So let me give you a different word to think about other than dominance. If nobody's dominant, and if certainly Georgia's not dominant, what if you're just successful? What if it doesn't require dominance to win? What if you just need to succeed? That means on defense, what if it means just stopping the other team? Doesn't have to be 100 sacks, but it probably needs to be some. You don't have to force 5 turnovers, but you probably need the benefit of 1 or 2 every now and then just to make things a little bit easier. What if you maintain what you have done well, stop the run, by adding a little more to that in a game like this Saturday against Auburn? In other words, Kirby Smart, practice this week, what the blank is going on with our defense. A lot of Georgia fans have wondered the same thing a lot already this season. But Saturday against Auburn, with an offense that they will admit Hugh Freeze, offensive-minded head coach that he personally will admit has been struggling. He himself falling into bad habits, not leaning on the running game. Quarterback, once again, that can't quite seem to activate the passing attack. This is a great day for the Georgia defense to get right, to get healthy, to get its legs under it a bit. Maybe not as dominant as it once was, but can it be successful, and can it lead to a path for Georgia to victory? We believe it can. In fact, it probably needs to on the Plains on Saturday. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We are happy you are with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video. We do that at 10 a.m., on demand on video anytime after that. Of course, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. What a thrill it is to have you with us. Fun, busy show, getting ready to roll through on a Friday here, getting ready for an awesome game day tomorrow. Traveling over to Auburn, can't wait to be there, withstanding the atmosphere, the loud crowd, and doing as others have told us this week, trying to get off to a fast start, quiet that crowd down, and see if Georgia can get another big road win in all of this. And of course, when it comes to maybe being at home and enjoy this, as I was walking around today, it's a little cooler outside. You notice that? We've felt a little bit of taste of fall here and there. And so that starts getting you thinking about the things that you want during the fall time of year, which means maybe cutting on your heat and stuff like that. And of course, when you're thinking about that, we sometimes think about our friends at Georgia Natural Gas and the great partnership they've formed with Kroger here right now. Kroger brings our show to us here today, and they want you to know about what they're doing right now with our friends at Georgia Natural Gas, because they're going to help you save money on both your grocery bill and your natural gas bill here this time of year. All you got to do is, when you enroll right now with Georgia Natural Gas, you're going to get a $100 Kroger gift card. Great new rate, too, from our friends at Georgia Natural Gas, but as a great incentive, a $100 Kroger gift card to go with that. Truly a win-win situation for you here right now. You can make your budget, your grocery budget stretch a little further, and of course, you enjoy the great comfort you get from the wonderful natural gas provided by Georgia Natural Gas. Whether it's food on the grill or the heat or whatever you need, that Georgia Natural Gas just keeps your home feeling homey and cozy this time of year. We love that. So here's what I want you to do. Check out Georgia Natural Gas online to find out more about this. It's GNG, that stands for Georgia Natural Gas, GNG.com/Kroger100. That's GNG.com/Kroger100. That's the number 100. GNG.com/Kroger100. You can learn about the entire thing, including the terms and conditions that apply. But it's a great place to go. Get signed up. Get that great rate from Georgia Natural Gas. And as I said, a $100 Kroger gift card. So one more time, it's GNG.com/Kroger100 to find out more about that today. Okay, we got Jeff Sentell here coming up in a little bit. Also, before we're done, as a part of our Golden Shoes, speaking of the his history and pageantry and the great, celebration of what Georgia-Auburn has been, we had several Georgia fans to reach out to us and say, on the heels of the stories we were telling about the 1986 game yesterday, I was there. They've got their personal stories. We'll celebrate some of those coming up as a part of our Golden Shoe a little bit later on, and we'll also give you some final thoughts on big games across the rest of college football. All of that is coming up before we're done here today. Prior to that, though, let's go around the Doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And we just spent a good bit of time talking about the Georgia defense. I want to talk about the Georgia offense here for a moment. And I want to do so with the thought that when Saturday is done, when we're late night driving back home, when you're waking up early Sunday morning, Georgia will have made it to the halfway point of the regular season. Now, we hope it's nowhere near the halfway point of the season in total, but it will be at the halfway point of the regular season when Saturday's game is done. And by the way, isn't it weird to think we get there as quickly as we do? The college football season always flies by. So at this point, you would assume that whatever Georgia's showing you in some form or fashion is what they are. Doesn't mean there can't be still improvement, but that improvement is likely to be incremental. The notion that somehow after this game on Saturday, Georgia's going to dramatically reinvent itself is unlikely. And it may not need to, right? It may be in pretty good shape. If it's getting a road win against Auburn and coming back home for a huge home game against Ole Miss, heading into its second off week prior to the Florida game, at that point, or the other stuff that's coming up, at that point, you're going to probably say, hey, Georgia's about where we sort of thought it would be, or about where you would have had reasonable hopes for it could be. Georgia could still very much be on track for all of the end-of-season goals that we had for it before this season began. but continuing to fully identify what your offensive identity is, I think, is a really important part of that. And that's why Saturday's game, reaching the halfway point, I think is pretty crucial in, if Georgia wins, how does it win? Who does it lean on? Who do we now know that you can count on? And who do we want to see Georgia dialing up week in and week out for the rest of the season? Trying to keep the list intentionally short because that's the nature of this. For me, it kind of comes down to a handful of names. The name that's most recently emerged, and I think is now a real factor on this team, and you've got to give him credit for what he's done, is Chauncey Bowens. We were guilty of not really talking about Bowens enough leading into the season. We had reason to believe from others that maybe he was more ready for breakout potential than I realized. And the folks who thought that were whispering that to me in some cases in private conversation, they turned out to be right. Bowens has turned out to be a very good player. And that was certainly true in the Alabama game. In fact, if anything, Georgia squandered his performance against Alabama in what turned out not to be a win. But we saw some of those same kind of runs against Kentucky last week. Well, now, in terms of furthering your offensive identity, more of Chauncey Bowens doing what he has been doing against Auburn on Saturday, we think that's a big deal. We would also say the same thing about Gunnar Stockton when it comes to his running game. Obviously, Stockton's going to be the quarterback. He's going to factor into everything that's going to happen for Georgia. But the 2 rushing touchdowns we saw from Gunnar in the first quarter last week, we hope that is the sort of thing that can be dialed up and counted on week to week. That's a part of the offensive identity of Georgia, something we can count on seeing each week, at least in some form or fashion. And then when Georgia does throw it, while there's always going to be chatter about, last week Dylan Bell was a breakout star, or you want to see more from Noah Thomas, and you want to see this, you want to see that. And all of that is fair and true and worth discussing. I think that Georgia has had this season 2 receivers that have clearly stepped to the forefront over anybody else. It's the transfer Zachariah Branch and the guy that's now been here for more than a year, Colby Young. Right now, Young and Branch, when healthy, are Georgia's 2 best receivers. And if Georgia really does dial it up in the pass game on Saturday, you're going to want to spread it around a little bit, but making sure that Branch and Young get their touches, because good things seem to happen when they do touch it. That, to me, is what the Georgia offensive identity is supposed to be. It begins with running game. That includes Gunnar running. And when you do turn it into the passing attack, while you want to spread it around, get as much as you can for Colby Young, getting as much as you can for Zachariah Branch. That is a huge part, I believe, of the Georgia offensive identity. Now, it's fair to point out that the last time Georgia went to Auburn, 2023, it had a true passing game weapon to feature. And because the game was closer than it was supposed to be, they ended up featuring him a ton. Remember the second half of that game against Auburn? It's just one throw right after another. Bowers. The all-time great, we believe, in Georgia, Brock Bowers, was fed over and over and over again. It's fair to point out that not every game in his Georgia career did Bowers get that many looks, that many touches. Sometimes Georgia, even if it knew he was open, seemingly would go away from him just to get other guys involved. But when they had to throw it to Brock, they knew they could. He was the classic go-to guy in every sense of the word. Kirby Smart was asked this week, would it be nice to have another true go-to guy? Or are you okay, as I said before, spreading a little bit here and a little bit there and getting this guy involved and that guy involved and just spreading the wealth on offense? Kirby gave a pretty colorful answer to that. This is what he said.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great, right? Could be a generational player for all I know. I don't know, but I don't prefer it either way. I love the team we have. I love the team we had. There is no, I would rather have one dominant player that can key on and stop. I mean, we had a lot of good players around Brock. So it was great to have him. We've got a lot of really good players now that I have a lot of confidence in, and a lot of ability to spread the ball around to a group of people that's dictated by the defense. I don't think people really understand a lot of our reads are based on what the defense does, because it gives you an advantage if they do this. It's not just him plays, and him plays get you in trouble sometimes.
With due deference to Kirby Smart and with all, due humbleness on my part, I would suggest that I don't know that it's certainly based on the evidence true that Smart doesn't prefer one or the other when it comes to a superstar that you feature over and over or an ensemble cast that you spread it around to, because we're now going on year 10 of Kirby Smart at Georgia, and every one of his offenses have ended up spreading the ball around a lot as opposed to featuring an individual guy. I mean, even in the Brock Bowers era, go back and look at some of the game logs from 2022 when Georgia winning a national championship, and look how many games that season Bowers only had a couple of catches. Now, given how good Brock was, including when healthy in the NFL, he's already arguably the best tight end in the entire league. Georgia could have fed Bowers a lot more if it wanted to, but oftentimes they were content to spread it around because, if I had to guess, they want to keep guys happy. Back during that era of the program, they knew they were going to win no matter what, so why not do just that? But in most instances, like the one that Georgia finds itself in this year, things don't come quite as easy. And Kirby calls them him plays, a play that's designed to feature him, whoever him might be in a given moment. He says those can get you in trouble. It's better to just take whatever the defense gives you. But as I told Jake Fromm earlier this week, the danger there is that if you only take what the defense gives you, then you might be stuck with whatever it is that the defense wants you to have. And you better believe what the defense wants for you is not quite as explosive and not quite as successful as what you might seek to get on your own. So how do you get what you want, being explosive as you need to be, being as successful as you want to be? I do think, to use a word I've been using a lot lately, I do think you've got to figure out what your offensive hierarchy looks like. And make sure the right guys get the most touches as many times as they can. There isn't probably a Brock Bowers in this team. That's not meant to slight the guys that Georgia does have, but Brock Bowers type players just don't come around every single year. But you do have some guys who've proven to be more explosive than others, guys who are leading to offensive success more so than others are. And as I said before, I think it's becoming apparent what that should be. It's a lot of Chauncey Bowens, but a lot of the running game overall. Some of that involves Gunner with his legs, throwing the ball to Zachariah Branch, throwing the ball to Colby Young, and then beyond that, figuring out what else you can sprinkle in there. Is it more creative run plays with Dylan Bell? Is it more throws to the tight end? Oscar Delp had a big catch last week. Do you finally get Noah Thomas involved? On and on you could go. London Humphreys has obviously already had a big moment for Georgia this year. But while those guys are additive to the overall experience offensively, there is a nucleus that's just getting it done at a more successful rate. It's Bowens, it's Branch, it's Young for me, and those are the guys that I hope to see Georgia lean on as much as it can on Saturday and throughout the rest of the season as well. That is also around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, I will tell you that when I see these stories in the news of dog bite, dog gets loose, negligence on the part of an owner, especially when it involves a child or an elderly person, something like that, I always find these stories to be, frankly, maddening. They make me mad. It's also scary to think that through no fault of your own, something like this could happen. And that's why we believe that this aspect of life that some people encounter is really no different than any other personal injury situation, where if it impacts you, you deserve your right and chance to fight for compensation like any other personal injury situation you might experience. And if you do find yourself in need of a situation like that, we think an attorney that has chosen to specialize in this very narrow aspect of personal injury law, hiring an attorney like that's one of the best decisions you're ever going to make, because they just know the intricacies of the law and how it is impacted by these situations more so than somebody else you might work with. So my encouragement to you, if you've been bitten by a dog, injured by a dog, someone you love that's happened to them, and owner just wasn't taking proper care of their animal, well, reach out to our friends at Zagoria Law to fight for the compensation you need. Pain and suffering, medical bills, everything else. You can give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE, dog spelled D-O-G, 833-GA-DOG-BITE. You can also find them online, ZagoriaLaw.com, Z-A-G-O-R-I-A, ZagoriaLaw.com. We love having a part of Around the Doghouse. We believe in what they do for people who've been impacted in this situation. If that's your story, make sure you reach out to Zagoria Law here today. Okay, before we're done, big thoughts on all of the big games throughout the rest of the weekend. In particular, maybe one game that Georgia fans may be curious to look in more so than some others, although that may be true for a couple of these games this week. And we'll talk about that here coming up. But for now, on everything involving Georgia recruiting, it's actually been a busy week with notes involving UGA commits. Let's cover all of that and more. Jeff Sentell here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Happy to have Jeff Sentell, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. As I said before, busy week on the UGA recruiting front. Jeff, let me start with Georgia running back commit Jae Lamar. You had reporting earlier this week that Lamar was not with the Colquitt County team. I guess there had been a little bit of a dust-up, or however you want to describe that, between him and some folks there on the staff. And I'll let you kind of help tell the story here. But it sounds like that perhaps now Lamar, I guess, is back with the team again. What can you tell us about this situation involving Lamar, Colquitt County? Obviously, major ramifications for Georgia because he's one of the prize commits in this class. So give me the entire deal here. His status with Georgia, his status with Colquitt County, and as much of the backstory details as you can provide.
So, Brandon, good morning. I think much of that story is kind of being written right now. And what I mean is, first of all, the Jae Lamar story is going to be magnified. Here's a little perspective, and then we'll zoom in. He didn't play. This is a very rare story. I'm sure most of our audience is aware of it by now. He didn't play his freshman or sophomore years of high school because he was, in his own words, kind of a troubled kid. He was always getting in trouble. Was it anything serious enough for expulsion? No, but it was the type of trouble where he couldn't play football on Friday nights because he was even placed in alternative school. Well, before his junior season, he did something what I like to call swallow a grow-up pill. That's a moment when immature young men realize the future in front of them with football, and then they decide they want to take advantage of said future. And that's what Jae Lamar did. Based off one season, he climbed to the nation's number 10 running back. He got a Georgia offer, Miami, Florida State, Auburn, the whole shooting match. And then he commits to Georgia. Brandon, it was one of the most emotionally charged commitment ceremonies I've ever seen, especially the amount of tears that flowed. But with these young people these days, Brandon, reports came out that you would say disagreements, you would say, I tried to, without throwing a young person that's obviously trying to make something out of himself like Jae Lamar is, he had some conduct unbecoming, I would say, of a team member in good standing. And it got to the point where I actually reached out to the coach of the Colquitt County Packers, and Sean Calhoun, who, by the way, is one of the nicest coaches around, really easy guy to get along with as far as the spectrum of football coaches go. He said he's no longer with us. Now, Brandon, I believe, and I've been told, that he is in some respects back on the Colquitt County team now. Does that mean starting this Friday night? I don't think so. Does it even mean suiting up or playing? I don't think so. But he's kind of working his way back onto the team. There's probably some penance that has to be done there. So how it funnels into Georgia is the running back recruiting, Brandon, especially at the high school level, has been rocky the last 2 or 3 cycles, especially since Dell McGee went on to take the job at Georgia State. What I mean by that is there was one high school signee last year in Bo Walker. Currently, Jae Lamar is the only high school commitment in this class, in the 2026 class. So obviously, if his status with Colquitt County was not in good standing, well, that's not a good step for the way Kirby Smart likes to run his program. And eventually what's going to take place, and this is what I mean, the story is still being written here, Brandon, is Jae Lamar may be back on the team. He may even be back to making big gains and explosive plays like everybody's seeing on the screen there. But it's going to be a work in progress. So, I mean, he needs to stack together, just be a good teammate. Don't even need to be an excellent All-American running back. I think the most important thing there is to go along, get along, finish his career out with Colquitt County strong and as a viable and a good chemistry gel with the rest of his team and his coaching staff. And then there'll probably be a conversation where Georgia talks to the Colquitt staff and they say something along the lines of, where is he at right now? Where was he? Do you think he will be a problem here? Would you bring him onto your football team if you were a part of the coaching staff at the University of Georgia? And that's what I mean. It's still ongoing because I think those experiences, those moments are still being charted.
Yeah, I will just say the only thing I'll offer by way of opinion when we talk about something different is that I'm not very easily scandalized when it comes to stuff like this because just like you, Jeff, I've got kids, you've got kids. I've been around coaches, been around young men in sports working to grow up. And when you're actually in it with young folks as they learn how to be men and they learn how to go on to the next phase of their life, what actually happens in real life doesn't always reflect the kind of rosy picture that you might want to put on social media or something like that. Actual real family life sometimes requires rolling up your sleeves and doing some hard work and learning some hard lessons and learning a hard lesson a hard way. And I've always been of that mindset, whether it be a player going to Georgia or a player that goes even to a place like Florida or Auburn, one of these schools that we don't like, is that, hey, the process of growing and developing is not always a linear progression. And sometimes it has some detours along the way, but ultimately it matters where you get to by the time it's all said and done. So, whatever has caused Lamar to be away from his football team for a little bit, or whatever caused him to miss some time in football his first couple of years in high school. I hate that for him personally, but it doesn't make me say, oh, well, therefore you can't be connected to this young man or anything like that. I just don't operate that way. And frankly, when it comes to a good coaching staff like the one that Colquitt County has and like the one that most of the big schools in Georgia have, I trust those coaching staffs almost to the full extent possible of they're in it with these guys. If it benefits the player to play, they're going to let him play. If it benefits the player to step away from football and not do that, well, they're obviously going to do that too. Like, I have an immense level of trust for these coaching staffs. And helping a young man grow and take the next step and do the next thing, that is not for everybody. It's just not. You've got to be wired a certain kind of way to be able to withstand the emotional stress that sometimes that comes with it. And it is not in the actual process of doing it. It is not always a pretty process. And so that's what seems to be going on here. I think when it's all said and done, Lamar will be better for it. I trust the Colquitt County staff to do what they need to do. And frankly, in terms of his status here with Georgia, I wouldn't have any problem with Georgia saying he's just as much of a commit to us as he always was, because high school is about growing up and learning how you need to take care of your business. Not everybody will agree with that. And frankly, I don't care. That's my opinion. What do you think?
I think it's kind of difficult, Brendan, because a lot of the way the new age coaches, the modern coach has to coach the modern athlete now, when he can transfer at a whim in Georgia high schools. Because Jae Lamar, there's the new 3 transfer rule, which means you can transfer once, but you can't transfer twice. And he hasn't had a transfer, so he has the ability to go anywhere in the state of Georgia, provided he makes a bona fide move and be immediately eligible. 2 schools of thought on this, and I'm going to let the viewer, the consumer of this information, kind of decide for themselves. One of these schools of thought, which I guess is a baseline school of thought, is you got to think about what had to take place for the best player on the football team to basically no longer be welcomed or no longer a part of their football team. That takes quite a lot. If you ask a lot of coaches across the country, it's going to have to be something serious, something like, jeopardizing the rest of the team chemistry. Like, there was actually a report, Brandon. We weren't in Moultrie the day this happened, but we've all got our sources. There was actually a report coming out of WAOB TV in Albany, where there was basically a practice situation where Lamar was depicted as being upset. And then he spoke to a reporter for WAOB TV, and he was asked, were you being disrespectful to the coaching staff? And he admitted that he was being disrespectful. So I'm always an old school guy on this, Brandon, especially with athletes. People can say that, athletes get special treatment. Well, they have always gotten special treatment. But I've never liked the idea where, okay, what was the most positive thing in this young man's life? It was the football program and the platform and the trajectory he was on with his football career. I've never been a big fan, and I've heard coaches over the years tell me this, that you don't want to pull the only positive thing in the young man's life away from him, because that's probably a recipe for disaster. He doesn't get better through that. He doesn't get better if he's not around people that are invested in him, or if he's not on a football team. Think about the opportunities for trouble for a young man that wants to shut down their senior year because they're already committed and they're already got their NIL deal and they know where they're going to play in the SEC. I think you need to keep those positive influences around young people. And the other school of thought is folks will wonder, well, if he's going to, quit on his team or do something like say, I'm going to transfer out of here, then he's going to give up on the kids he grew up playing ball with, the kids he went to lunch with, the kids he was on the backyard field in elementary school and middle school with playing ball at recess. If he's just going to unplug from all that, there's going to be a very low sense of loyalty wherever he goes in college football. These are all very competing philosophies right there. But, again, I think the conventional wisdom here is that the young man, if he's now gotten the opportunity to work his way back onto good standing with the team, I think that's only going to help him in the long run. And I think that will go to show how good a fit he will continue to be at the University of Georgia.
Talk about a different Georgia commit for a moment. Tough news for Khamari Brooks, outstanding edge rusher for North Oconee. He suffered a pretty serious injury here. His senior season is now done, which is obviously bad for Brooks in particular. North Oconee, the reigning state champion, 4A from a state championship standpoint, arguably the deepest classification in Georgia right now. That throws all of that into a tizzy here a bit. But for the purposes of a Georgia football recruiting conversation, how serious is the injury for Brooks, and how much of a setback will this be for his future football career?
Brandon, it's kind of you got to examine the words here. He described it as a small fracture of his hip. 3 months he'll be sidelined, but no surgery necessary. Happened in a game. And, I hate it for Khamari because he has ended every one of his seasons in high school as a champion. His sophomore basketball season, champion. Junior basketball season, champion. Junior football season, champion. Brandon, I was already looking forward to the dream matchup between North Oconee and Creekside somewhere in the GHSA 4A bracket. And now North Oconee's status as the defending champion is definitely lessened. But let me tell you something about Khamari Brooks. It was amazing when I learned that he had a hip injury, including a fractured hip, because I saw him the very next day. It happened in a game. And then the very next day he was in Athens for the Kentucky game. He was walking around. He was moving up and down freely. There was no limp, or there was no disruption in his gait, so to speak. And he was smiling and cutting up and having a great time. And I say this with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but if anybody that I know and that I care about can suffer a fractured hip, I hope they have the fractured hip, that condition that Khamari has. More things to know about Georgia. The 3-month timeline, I know some people are already thinking. Khamari, he's going to graduate in December. He's going to report to the team for bowl practices in late December. That kind of meshes up with the timeline, depending on how outstanding Georgia's season is in terms of the college football playoff and bowl practices. He should be able to at least be a walkthrough or dress out participant, maybe a little bit more by the end of December when he's supposed to be cleared from this injury.
So I will tell you that Brooks is one of my favorite guys in this class. I mean, he's obviously a very good player.
Great.
Just getting to know him a little bit. Seems like he's got the intangible stuff just off the charts, to the extent that intangibles can be on a chart. You get the point that I'm making. Really, really like him a lot. I mean, I hate it anytime a football player like this gets injured, but obviously I believe he'll do whatever's necessary to get back. But anytime I have a chance to tout just what a good dude I think that Khamari Brooks is, and how valuable I think he's going to be to a Georgia pass rush that needs some valuable players, I want to make sure I do that. I think that Brooks is just one of the best guys in this class.
Respect. He's got a lot of it from amongst the Georgia staff, amongst his peer commitments, and all the coaches in the state. Brandon, this guy's going to be an edge, and he's going to be a true run setter, in all the best usage of that terms. I think the player parallels go anywhere from like a Davin Bellamy to a DeAndre Walker to an Azeez Ojulari to a Chaz Chambliss and to a Nolan Smith. He's kind of going to do all those good things, and he's going to be a team leader in doing so. He was so athletic, Brandon. This is the way you like to hear about your edge prospects, that he was also catching about maybe 4 or 5 balls a game for about 60 yards and, about 8 touchdowns every year as a tight end for North Oconee.
Yes.
And perhaps the most impressive thing that can be said about Khamari is he's been stamped by the Georgia legend, or at least the Georgia 3-time All-American David Pollock, as one of the most intelligent football players he's ever been around. He termed him brilliant. David saw him in, I guess, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade Pop Warner Little League ball, and he couldn't stop him. They couldn't deal with him. He was the best player on the field, but he'd already figured out David's offense by halftime. And he was like, man, sooner or later, I want to have the ability to coach this guy. He wanted to try and get him into the Pop Warner Little Leagues in that area so he could be a part of the North Oconee feeder program. And, That's one of those things when David Pollack, the first thing he says about a young man is his intelligence, his incredible football intelligence, and uses the word brilliant. And on top of the 6'4", 230, two-way player, state champion, this, that, basketball player. Alabama wanted him. He chose Georgia over the Dogs. That's a pretty good pedigree for this dog coming into town.
We had a chance to feature him on television earlier this season. Got another Georgia commit on TV tonight. I want to talk to folks about that here coming up in a moment. Let me remind folks before we do, though, quick shout out to our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. We love Georgia-grown talents when it comes to football field, but we also love these Georgia-grown apples like what comes from Mercier Orchards way up there in Blue Ridge, Georgia. Gorgeous, couple of 100 acres stretched all across the North Georgia mountains. And it's an unbelievable time, first of all, to go visit Mercier Orchards. And you can be a part of the apple picking. You can experience all the fall events they have going on, but you can also get the great taste of Mercier Orchards Hard Cider right there in your own home, whether it be from your local grocer, your favorite beverage store, or oftentimes on tap at your favorite restaurant. The delicious taste of Mercier Orchards Hard Cider can be yours to enjoy. And as you're out there doing your shopping or enjoying a great dining experience, if you don't see Mercier Orchards Hard Cider, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to ask for it. We've had great success and heard about great success with folks who say, would you mind stocking Mercier Orchards Hard Cider? I want to try whether it be the Just Peachy, the Grumpy Granny, or some of the great flavors that they're famous for, those flavor blends. I want to enjoy that. And oftentimes these grocers and beverage stores folks and even the restaurant folks, when it comes to the on tap behind the bar, they're doing that, and people are just loving it. We love telling the story of this Georgia-grown company. We love Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. Make sure you check it out today. You can just search Mercier Orchards Hard Cider, Mercier spelled Mercier. You can also find it at mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider. That's why I say search it. Search Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. You'll get to where you need to go. All right, Jeff, so Keelin Jones on TV tonight, Atlanta News First, Peachtree Sports Network, Sprayberry against River Ridge. We're excited about that game and really looking forward to showcasing Jones on TV tonight. Another one of these guys, as many of the Georgia players do, which will play both sides of the ball for Sprayberry tonight, but good-looking safety prospect. What is Georgia getting in Jones?
First of all, Brandon, this is kind of a tailor-made dog. His mother went to Georgia. You can call him a legacy. And he committed to Georgia really early, like maybe April, May, basically when Georgia got serious and said that they would accept his commitment. Such a committed dog that he was I would say, was a little stunned by the question, Brandon, when we were checking in with all Georgia's commitments around, June, July. And I was like, what is the status of your commitment? Are you locked in and are you shut down? And he was like, dude, I don't even know I had to shut it down. When you commit, you're committed. You're done. Like you don't, do we need to say this? Do I need to say that I'm still going to Georgia and I'm not talking to any other school? Well, that's what it is. Big safety, Brandon. Georgia's got a lot of those. It seems like Kirby Smart and the staff have sensed that was definitely an upgrade or an upload or an infusion of more reinforcements for that position moving forward for the 2026 season. He does play both ways, and he's the type of guy that's going to get you about 80 yards and maybe a touchdown on offense as a running back. But what he is a physical downhill type safety, got a lot of ball skills. He loves to strike you. He loves to put his pads on you and maybe let the other side taste his helmet. In tight, enclosed spaces. He's going to blitz a little bit, and combined with what they have at Sprayberry with the 5-star Alabama cornerback commitment, Jordan Edmonds, that's a lot of dual two-way Ironman SECs going there with Keelin Jones in the backfield and Jordan Edmonds catching passes. And together, they give you a lot of variety. He's like, I didn't even believe, he told me about this play, and he's like, I couldn't believe the guy just threw it right up at me, and he had the wherewithal to go up the elevator a little bit to the 10th floor, take that pick, and then take off to pay dirt. I want to talk about him in terms of the most devoted commitment you could ever expect. When the Georgia offer came, he was like, dude, what am I kind of waiting for? I need to be a dog.
Speaking of high school football, to wrap up, this is not recruiting related, but I think it's a big story nonetheless. GHSA announcing this week they're making a major change for next year to the postseason format. I know this is controversial, and there's no way to do anything that everybody's going to like, but moving to more of a power rating style seating as opposed to the basic 1 through 4 from each region getting placed in the bracket, 1 and 2 getting home games, 3 and 4 going on the road. I think this is a change for the better. And Jeff, the thing I think is going to be the most interesting about this is a lot of teams now play tough non-region games to begin a season, but quietly, a lot of coaches will tell you, if we win, it's great. If we lose, no big deal. It's the region games that count. But now that your power rating is going to determine your playoff status as much as your region ranking necessarily does, I think these big non-region games we see at the beginning of the season, this is the high school version of a non-conference game in college football. All of a sudden now the motivation to win these games, I think, goes up. I just think that high school football just got more competitive because of this decision, and obviously Georgia recruits will be showcased in these games starting next year. What did you make by this? This is among the biggest announcements GHSA has made in quite some time. What did you make of the announcement?
Well, first of all, it gives all the coaches in the state something to really cast an eye about. I don't know if you saw it, Brandon, but I thought AJCvarsity.com and Georgia High School Football Daily had an interesting thing where they simulated the 2024 season and kind of ran them through the assembly line of what the playoffs would look like had that happen under these new parameters. And I thought it was interesting. You saw Grayson, for example, which was a top 10 team and a top 5 team. And I think they ended up a 10 seed in terms of the power rankings right there. So that right there, Brandon, is going to cause some consternation where you might be undefeated. You might be feasting on some lamb chop opponents in your county or in your local system. And you're not going to be rewarded with that come playoff time. And then like a lot of those teams like down in South Georgia that have their own version of the region of doom, they're going to be those top seeds and getting those home games because they play one of those hog molly heavyweights each and every week, not only during the region play, but also when they try to go schedule themselves out of conference. I think the biggest thing, Brandon, is it's going to change the way some people look at that in terms of, do I need winnable non-region or I need battle-tested non-region? Like, one of the most poignant things that has ever happened to me in my career as a football coach in the state of Alabama once said, you know what's awful, man? He said, what's awful is having a 7-0 team, 6-0 team, and everybody thinking they're great, and everybody in the locker room just gelling. And then you play a really good football team for the first time in week 7 in your region, and you get exposed. And it's like something about your team's engine just starts leaking from that point where it's crunch time and you've got a lot of things to fix because you don't know where your holes are. You don't know where you got to get better. You don't know where other teams are going to attack you. So main thing for me is I think it's going to be interesting how Georgia High School Association teams schedule from now on, because a lot of people don't mind going, I think about the Cedar Grove teams of years past, Brandon, when they'd limp into the playoffs at like a 4-4 or 5-4 or a 4-5 record or 5-5 record, and then they'd run through Class 3A because they played all the hard teams from higher classifications moving forward earlier in their season.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Jeff. It's going to be a brand new landscape for high school sports in Georgia, and we'll look forward to being a part of all of that. Hope you have a great weekend. Looking forward to making the trip over to Auburn with you tomorrow. Going to be a good one. A little nervous about it, but we'll see how it all plays out. Can't wait to share it with you, Jeff. And, of course, back here again next week, DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then.
Hey, man, take it easy, Brandon. Have a good call tonight. And, Brandon, there's an interesting story right now on DawgNation.com. The nation's number 2 tight end loves the Dogs. He said one thing about the program was darn near perfect, in air quotes right there. But he has a question. Brandon, that question is tight end usage. When have we heard that before from an elite tight end? Been a while. Check it out on DawgNation.com and get your read on.
Good story there at DawgNation.com. We'll also see tomorrow game day pregame show with Kaylee Manziel from the field there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So look forward to seeing you there for that busy day on video for DawgNation game day coverage. Jeff, thanks for your time.
See you, Brandon.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So Jeff brought up an interesting point. I want to just make this real quick, and then we'll move on here. Talked about how with the new power rating for high school that a team like Grayson, that we can all tell, is obviously one of the best teams in the entire country, so therefore would deserve to be among the better seeded teams in Georgia high school playoffs in a year like this, but they don't play in quite as deep a region. And so therefore their strength of schedule and things like that would not be quite as strong, and how based on the formula that they're going to use, which is winning percentage, opponent's winning percentage, and then your opponent's winning percentage, would end up some would say unfairly punishing Grayson. Kind of reminds me of what happens in college sports too, and I'll just make this point quick, is that when you look at various sports in college athletics about how they determine their postseason, you see a model like what we have in football, which I would argue is mostly humans with very little data. The people on the committee, it's fairly obvious, don't really understand how to tabulate college football data. They don't really know how to process that. It's mostly just eye test for them. It's one of the reasons why they gravitate towards teams that have fewer losses, even against soft schedules. It's just a very old school mindset. But within the world of college athletics, you have a completely different situation with, like, say, the hockey. Have you ever watched the Frozen Four? Do you know what that is? The NCAA hockey tournament is determined, believe it or not, only by data. Whatever their version of the RPI is, there's no human element whatsoever. So you've got football where it's humans, mostly no data, hockey where it's all data, no humans, and you've got a situation like what exists in basketball. And by and large, I think this is the best way to do it. Humans that use data. And if Georgia high school football could do that, it'd probably be the best thing to do. Humans that are able to take the information and then make a decision based on the information. People always say, hey, what does the data tell us? Well, technically, in any field, in any walk of life, data doesn't tell us anything. Data always has to be interpreted, and smart people demonstrate their intelligence by just being better at interpreting the data. And I think sports functions better that way too. So as we see the evolution in college football, making it more of a thing where humans use data as opposed to what we have now, or as opposed to what we could have if the computers just tell us what to do. Frankly, none of us want to live in that world. Then that's probably a change for the better. We'll see if college athletics can make that change. We're suspicious that it can. Let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean right now. Let's remind you that you've got a great chance to be on with us, Utopia of the Seas, this upcoming April. This has been, over the course of years, one of my proudest moments around DawgNation. Y'all know, I love cruising. I love watching people take fun vacations. I love the connection that gets made around this. Really, the two things in life that I probably enjoy the most. Obviously, college football and the Georgia Bulldogs, and frankly, taking fun vacations like you get on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. I don't have, other than maybe a little golf, I don't have anything else in my life other than those things. Those are my three main things. We do love a great cruise vacation, and it has been a privilege over the course of these last 5 years, I guess, to be able to share a great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation with all of you who join us on Utopia of the Seas. Still have a chance to do that. Jessica Slater is helping us with that. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's the number, 770-718-9147. That's how you book your stay on the DawgNation cruise this April. You can also email her if you'd like, jslater@dreamvacations.com. It's April 20th through the 24th. We're leaving Port Canaveral, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay. It's an amazing experience. It is my privilege to share it with so many of you, and I hope more will join us to be there this upcoming April. I cannot wait for that. All right, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean here right now. Let's give you some final thoughts on the weekend's big games here for a moment, including a game that I think that will be of very much interest to Georgia fans, because much like Georgia goes on the road to Auburn, people have the perception that Georgia's way better, but the point spread's pretty narrow. Similar situation for Alabama and Missouri, where this thing's been dropping all week. Almost all the action's been on Missouri. The spread probably started off a little more narrow than some would have thought who don't follow gambling closely, things like that. But it's even moved even more the direction of Missouri, where now you're looking at Bama's about a field goal favorite, could even get less than that. A lot of action on Missouri here in this spot. Alabama having to go on the road. My official pick is Alabama for the game. Just don't quite think. And listen, Missouri is a team we've been high on. That was my number one season win total in the SEC before the season began. We are sailing past that number right now, at least on pace to 7.5 before the year began. But to go 8-4, you don't have to beat Alabama, and we don't think Missouri's going to. But let me tell you what will be of note and of interest to Georgia fans. A couple of weeks ago, we didn't see Georgia get after Ty Simpson at all. Simpson was just in as clean a pocket as he could be in, and obviously the results were what they were. He feasted on third down, especially in the first half. Got everything he wanted. They set records that day converting third downs, and they go on to get the victory. And when the game is over, the line of thought is, well, how can you get to the quarterback when he's getting rid of it so quickly? There's nothing you can do when the quarterback's getting rid of the football as quickly as he is. And maybe it is as simple as that. Sometimes it is. But we're about to find out because, if we're being honest, Missouri has been way better at getting quarterback pressure, way better at getting after quarterbacks than Georgia has been. And one of the main guys that's been doing that is the former dog himself, Damon Wilson. So I do think it creates some questions. If Georgia, once again, against an Auburn team that gave up 10 sacks against Oklahoma and given up more than, I think it's 21 sacks in the season, by far the most in the SEC. If it's once again a situation against this Auburn team, more difficult to do on the road, I grant that, but still, if this Georgia team is not getting after Auburn and getting Jackson Arnold on the ground, and then you watch Missouri against Alabama have success with a former Georgia player doing what Georgia couldn't do against Ty Simpson, that's not going to be a great look. So it's one of the reasons why I think the Georgia fans will be watching that game pretty closely on Saturday, although I do like Alabama to win. I also like Texas against Oklahoma. Line for this one's been all over the place. Texas, surprisingly, in the eyes of some, opened the week as a favorite. They've been like 1.5, 2-point favorite this week. By the time we get to game time, almost certainly Oklahoma will be the favorite here. John Mateer's status has been raised to probable. He was questionable yesterday. Now he's probable. This is one of those things where you just have to use your best hunch. And my hunch is, what will be 17 days from surgery on the on John Mateer. I just don't believe he's fully healthy. I really don't. I think he's going to try to go. But most of the time, this ends up just being a smokescreen, a mirage, if you will. I don't have high hopes for John Mateer in this game, and I don't believe that Oklahoma, although they are very good defensively, I don't believe that Oklahoma is the same kind of team without him as they would be with him. Now, Texas has its own problems. Of course, that's the case. Offensive line's been horrible. Arch Manning, even if some of the criticism this week's been overblown, the criticism in and of itself is fair. He's just nowhere near the kind of quarterback he was originally portrayed to be, and he may never be. That just may not be what it is. But the mistake that we make continually, by we, I mean college football fans just in aggregate, is we have a tendency to write off teams from playoff consideration way too soon. In 2014, the first year of the college football playoff, that's what happened with Ohio State when they lost to Virginia Tech. They can't make the playoff now. They have this embarrassing non-conference loss. But they actually went on to make the playoff and win that year's national championship. Even last year, Notre Dame can't make the playoff. They lost to Northern Illinois. Not only did they make the playoff, they beat Georgia and played for the national championship. We have a tendency to write teams off too soon. As much as I don't want this to be true, I have to admit it has the feeling of being true. Texas is a flawed team. I do not believe that Texas can or will win the national championship. I do not believe they are done from playoff consideration yet. In fact, think ahead to November. When they come to Athens to play Georgia, in my mind, I still have that game. When I close my eyes and picture it, I still picture that game being as big as we ever thought it was going to be. That means that Texas has got to win the games it plays between now and then to make that be the case. That includes the rivalry win against Oklahoma on Saturday. Wherever the point spread lands on this, when you get to it, just know I think this is a day for Texas to reestablish itself a bit and to create this new firestorm of media hype about, people wrote them off too soon. Let the record reflect, while we are certainly suspicious of the hype to begin the season, we never quite wrote them off either. We like Texas against Oklahoma tomorrow. A couple of others real quick. A&M hosts Florida. A&M's been a relatively big touchdown plus favorite in this game, 7.5. That's the number. And I think A&M covers that number. They're very good defensively right now. They're getting better on offense. They haven't always stood up well at home. But this is a classic spot that we do not like, teams typically speaking. And for a Florida team that's just so weak from a mental standpoint, we like them even less. You get the dramatic home win. Now you go on the road, and it's just a completely different atmosphere and a completely different environment. We think Florida falls prey to that. We think they lose to Texas A&M. And frankly, watch how quickly, and some of the chatter this week from general manager, from fans, things like that, would remind you that this is still pretty prevalent. Watch how quickly Billy Napier goes from the brief salve of getting the win against Texas to all of a sudden he's just right back on the hot seat as much as he ever was. Napier is not popular with Florida fans, and we're always only one game away from having to confront just how true that is. I believe the game against Texas A&M, against a defense that has a way of making the opponent look ugly. Florida's good defensively too, we don't deny that. But A&M has been real special defensively and just a much better team overall. I like them by more than a touchdown against Florida on Saturday. I'll also mention LSU hosting South Carolina. I want to take a flyer on the Gamecocks here. Gamecocks sizable underdog, 8.5 points. LSU coming off a loss to Ole Miss, then an off week after that. They seem to be reeling. They're not playing well offensively. We don't know. Is Garrett Nussmeier hurt? Some are suggesting that he is. Maybe he's just not as good as he was supposed to be either. A lot of those quarterbacks to begin the season have had their own version of struggles. Nussmeier hasn't been immune from that either. In the one big road game we've seen South Carolina in this year, it mostly got handled by Missouri. It also got beaten up pretty good at home to Vanderbilt. That was with a Lenora Sellers injury. And maybe that's enough for you to think that South Carolina can't be competitive against LSU. And you might turn out to be right. I am going to say with a lot of the same players from this year, a year ago, South Carolina was very good on the road. Won at Clemson, dominated at Vanderbilt, which was a pretty big win. Won convincingly at Oklahoma. That's something Alabama didn't do. Convincing wins. They had like 4 convincing road wins a year ago that demonstrate, good things for the program overall. So I like them to go into Baton Rouge. I mean, I'll win it, but it's 8.5-point number. I like them to keep it close there. So those are the games we have our eye on in the SEC. And then briefly, one final thought here. In the Big Ten, and by the way, we'll give you our official pick on Oregon and Indiana coming up as a part of our RS Andrews Cooldown. If you're watching on video, and if you're listening, you can go check out the DawgNation video channels for either Go With The Flow or the RS Andrews Cooldown at the conclusion of today's show to get those picks if you are interested, based on the way we've been picking lately. Maybe you're not interested. I don't understand if you're not, but if you are, you can get that there. But with the 2 big Big Ten games, Ohio State against Illinois, Oregon hosting Indiana, I used a word earlier in the show that there's this obsession right now with dominance of, well, do we have dominant teams? And is Georgia dominant? If Georgia's not dominant, who's dominant now? And it's dominance. It does certainly appear that 3 teams have probably separated themselves from the pack in a way that other teams across college football have not. One of those is Miami, and 2 of those in the Big Ten, Oregon and Ohio State. I will at least be watching closely this week when it comes to Oregon hosting Indiana, Ohio State playing Illinois. Can Ohio State and Oregon further demonstrate that they really are, in terms of their week-to-week, if not quite dominance, at least handling of their opponents, are they in a separate category from some of these teams, like where maybe Georgia finds itself, where from week to week you don't really know what you're going to get? There's a chance that Oregon and Ohio State really are in different categories, and against ranked opponents this week, especially in the case of Oregon hosting Indiana, that will be a real chance to show that. So we'll be watching that closely, and if that is what's on display, then we'll have to call it as it is, that maybe 3 teams, at least for the moment, have separated themselves from the pack, at least somewhat. We'll also make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, many of you making your plans to go over to Auburn tomorrow, and you're getting ready for a great tailgate experience. Others of you planning on just enjoying some fun fall stuff. I would say in our family, we got a little bit of everything going on. We got some sports going on this weekend. I'm going to Auburn, high school football, I guess, for folks here tonight. As you're thinking about all these great weekend activities, I want you to think about our friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors to get you ready for all of that too, because you want your tailgate to be amazing on Saturday. Well, the best things you can get to make your tailgate fun and enjoyable at the undefeatable prices, you get those at Academy Sports and Outdoors. They're the official sporting goods and outdoor retailer of the SEC. So if you want the tents, the canopies, the grills, the chairs, football to throw around, of course, you got to have that. All the things that makes an experience fun. You get all of that with our friends from Academy Sports and Outdoors. Also good-looking apparel. And I'm telling you, if you're like my son could just go and walk the aisles at Academy up and down, looking at all the sports equipment, all the things they have going on, because there's always something that you want when you go to Academy Sports and Outdoors. It's why we love having them part of our show, and happy to have them down here in the SEC as that official sporting goods provider of the outdoor retailer of the SEC. So find out more online. It's academy.com. That is academy.com for more on that today. And, of course, yesterday we talked about the great story from Mark Schleybaugh, ESPN.com, looking back at the 1986 Georgia-Auburn game and the fun footnote there that among those arrested, Gunnar Stockton's grandfather, now deceased, but his memory was really honored very well by that very funny story of, hey, he was actually trying to play the peacemaker and trying to get the Auburn folks not to savagely turn the hoses on not just the fans who'd gone onto the field, but even eventually the fans in the stands there as well. This was a lawless escapade. And I'm telling you, when I was a kid, adults were wild. And this is an example of just how wild the adults were back then. Well, as we told that story, we got some great feedback, and I'll show you this as part of our Golden Shoes. Several folks reaching out to tell us, hey, they remember this well, they were a part of it. Ed Thomas saying, I was in the Georgia student section on the Plains that night in 1986. Great memory in what was not a memorable season. I love that from Ed. Blake Kiker writes in to say, I was there too, saw Louis Grizzard after we got wet and left the field. Go Dogs. Can you imagine? I mean, talk about nothing more Georgia than that from the 1980s. Drenched in water after being soaked by those Auburn people. You see Louis Grizzard right there in the same situation, the legendary rider, now deceased himself. What an amazing anecdote, footnote that is to that story. And then Bulldog Bell, Christy writes in to say, she said, I wasn't there, but I was in the 11th grade, and I had a T-shirt that said, those who spray must pay. I had my own T-shirt. I don't have it anymore. I wish I still did. It said Revenge of the Wet Dog. Obviously, when Georgia played Auburn in 1987 in Sanford Stadium, those T-shirts were everywhere like that, making fun of the experience from the previous year. Unfortunately, Auburn did get that win in Athens in 1987. That was back during the period when the road team won a lot in this series. But a lot of folks sharing great memories of that game from 1980, I should say 1986, I mean to say. And we'll give Golden Shoes to Blake and Ed and Christy and everybody else who shared thoughts with us on that. Lousy stinking Gators. Speaking of rivals that can't beat Georgia as of late, that's true for them. How about 1,798 days? That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That's our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all enjoy the game tomorrow. Keep a good thought as the Dogs try to win the Deep South's oldest rivalry. One more time, we love all of that. Enjoy it. I'll see you for the post-game show from Jordan-Hare Stadium tomorrow evening. Kaylee's got you for the pregame. And, of course, I'll see you back here tomorrow. I should say Monday. Back here Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video time now for the R.S. Andrews cooldown. Speaking of, plugs and things like that. Also tonight, Atlanta News First for high school football. Georgia commit Keelin Jones. Sprayberry taking on River Ridge. River Ridge, a really fun program. One of the upstart programs in the Atlanta area that's really come on strong here. River Ridge and Sprayberry are going to be an incredibly fun game. Proud to be able to broadcast that tonight. Looking forward to doing that. Can't wait to see you there for that. All right, because it's a busy weekend, I'm going to save my voice a little bit. So let me take some comments, and then we won't go real long today. I am going to start on Facebook because I've been shortchanging them lately. Barry Watkins says if they put me on the radio, more folks would listen. I guarantee it. Well, that's nice to hear, Barry. I appreciate that. Doug Rayburn said some Auburn fans I knew had T-shirts that said, nothing smells worse than a wet dog. Yeah, the T-shirts back then were everywhere. I remember that very vividly. I'm telling you, this is one of my core childhood memories. I wasn't at the game, too young to be a part of any of the, the wildness. I was only probably, I guess in the third grade maybe. But wow, I mean, adults back then were wild. Adults were wild back then. Miriam Corbin says she thinks my voice is sounding better every day. I appreciate that, Miriam. Thank you very much. Appreciate it for sure. Trying to take care of it. Robert Hosea says he needs some good spots to eat. And he said he sent me a message on Twitter. Robert, I'm sorry I did not see that. I am sometimes a disorganized mess, but I will go back and look for it, and we'll see if we can crowdsource that and get you some help. So what Robert wants is, I guess he's coming in for a Georgia game, maybe around Atlanta, maybe around Athens, some places to eat. Y'all hit him up in the Facebook chat. And if you're on another platform, maybe check on it on Facebook and give Robert some suggestions on that. Oftentimes we find the audience to be more successful than anything on that, Robert. So we'll see if we can get you some help there. Jacob Alexander says Friday Night Lights, baby. I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to it. Robert says he's, by the way, when he comes in for the game, going to be losing his voice. He's yelling so loud. Robert, that's what we love. Now, you got to take better care of your voice than I guess I was for a while. But we love the idea of coming in here and ready to cheer loud, making good use of that Georgia ticket. That sounds plenty good for me. Sounds plenty good for me. Jacob Alexander says, I'm just itching going on the cruise. Listen, somehow, some way, like I said before, I got a small handful of things that I love in my life. I love college football. I like taking fun vacations, the likes of which we talk about around here. I play a little bit of golf. The problem is I'm not very good at golf. So, I'm probably better at taking vacations than I am at playing golf just because I'm not very good. Still enjoy it. But yeah, you better believe. It's just good, right? I mean, like the thing that, I know this sounds corny, but I'm a corny guy. I like to watch fans connect with each other. And a good vacation is a great way for people, like your family, your friends. You take a fun trip, you connect with people. And that's something that's really valuable for me. And I do enjoy doing that. I mean, selfishly, my kids are running around a bunch. My wife's got stuff going on. Obviously, I'm, going 100 miles an hour. But when you get away, cruise vacation, something like that, we go to theme parks. We're basically the Griswolds. When you do all that kind of stuff, you just connect in a way that you otherwise wouldn't. So that is something that's very special to me. It is. What else on Facebook? Marshall Fleming says Alabama's at the bottom of the SEC in stopping the run. Missouri's best running team in the SEC. Yeah, that should make for an interesting contrast. Now, early conference season for sure, sometimes it's hard to know. Okay, well, is Alabama really the worst run-stopping team, or did Georgia just have a good day against them? Because the reason why Alabama's numbers are so bad is because Georgia had a good day. So it's a little early to know, was this a consistent thing that's going to show up for Alabama, or is it a statistical anomaly because Georgia happened to have success? We'll find out as both teams play more. Similar thing for Auburn. Auburn has given up way more sacks than anybody else. Is that because they're just really not protecting the quarterback well, or did they just have a really bad day on the road against Oklahoma? It's going to take more data for that information to stabilize. And so that's what this weekend is going to be about in many respects. Of the perceptions we're starting to form for some of these SEC teams, how many of them are really true? Matt Rukavina says we need a Red October Auburn reference. Time for the Buckaroo Kirby to sink the rust bucket that is the Barnovich. I like that. Yeah, that's pretty good. A great throwback to the hunt for Red October. I like that. That's pretty good. Eric Ray says the voice sounds better. I just don't look any better. Yeah, unfortunately, the face is as God made me. The voice, I've been led to believe that there is some chance for improvement on that. The face, this is just sort of what it is. Just sort of what it is. It's also one of those things, too, where, it's a little chillier today, so I wore the pullover. I have found that gray makes me look more. When I wear gray, it brings out the gray in my hair. I look so gray today. My gosh, do I look gray? I'm for the most part just given up and just determined I am gray. But boy, I look gray.
Learned a lot about you here in the last 5 minutes. When I was a kid, adults were wild.
They were wild.
Gray makes your hair grayer.
Yeah, wearing gray makes your hair grayer. But Jay, let me give you an idea. So 86, which is when this Georgia-Auburn game took place, this is the first year that my grandfather started taking me to every Georgia game. I'd been to some Georgia games prior to that. Don't have fully vivid memories of those. I have vague memories of some of them. In 86, that's the year I started going to every Georgia game. And I'm telling you right now, on what we think of as now I always get the north and south stands confused, but I guess it would have been the north stands. It's the 300 level where the student section that's always empty is. When Georgia would score a touchdown, the adults that sat in that section would throw this POS, P-O-S-S. They were the concession provider back then. The POS cups, they'd just throw them. And as a kid, I'm having to hold my head like Georgia scores a touchdown. We got to assume the tornado drill position because adults are throwing cups willy-nilly. They don't care if it hits a kid in the head or anything like that. What we don't tolerate today compared to the just lawlessness of the 1980s. I'm just telling you, man, it was a wild time. Fun, crazy fun, because you never knew what was going to happen. But wild.
Speaking of shrapnel, did you see that Auburn is selling Cam Newton branded Yeti glasses tomorrow? Did see that. Does not sound like a great idea. It's sort of like, major league teams don't do bat day anymore. They don't do, you don't do ball. You don't want to, especially given what happened last year against Texas, you don't want to invite what could be a projectile. No, I don't think that's a very good idea, especially for a fan base that's already on edge. Thoughts and prayers for Cody on the sideline.
Yeah, exactly. Because let me tell you something. A Yeti style, tumbler is a little bit different than a water bottle, unfortunately. All right, I have spent a lot of time on Facebook, by the way. Let me just say that I have. Anything else? I'll come back to. We'll come back here in a minute. Let me hit YouTube for a moment here too. We'll see how they're doing. John Paul Williams on the subject of Ludlow Porsche. My grandfather used to talk about a lot. Both my grandfathers did, really. Ludlow Porsche is one of those guys where, like, I don't really know who that is, but I heard my grandfather talk about him a bunch. All of, like, the old Southern personalities, you should assume that my grandparents thought they were all just the greatest thing ever. Louis Grizzard, Ludlow Porsche, others. Whatever you think like old Southern people would have been into, my family was 1,000,000% into it. I can promise you that. But yeah, Ludlow Porsche, that's a name I definitely remember. And he used to say he had a face for radio. Yeah, I feel like that's probably true. Face for radio, probably. The truth is that I never really aspired to be on video. I do like doing a little TV every now and then, but I never really aspired to. DawgNation Daily has got to be a video show. I'll tell you the reason why we're on video, and now it's become just it's the way that everybody does things. But video, I'm going to use a word that we care about that you don't. Video is an incredible distribution system. YouTube, the reason why it's the gigantic platform that it is it distributes video. Think about, because you watch DawgNation Daily, then YouTube has an idea of other shows you might like to see. And YouTube distributes very well. And so eventually you have to start doing video because YouTube and video is just a much better distribution. For the most part, people have to find a podcast. They seek it out on their own. It's one of the reasons why I'm so protective of our podcast audience is because over the course of years, these are people that have chosen to seek us out, and I will protect them until my last breath. But the video folks, for the most part, have the show introduced to them. And obviously, we want that audience too. And so the purpose of being on video is for the distribution, not because I feel like, my face needs to be seen by everybody.
Talking about Ludlow, if you go deep in the internet, C-SPAN apparently was in that particular radio station in 1988 when the Democratic Convention was in town. Okay. So there is some behind-the-scenes video of Ludlow doing his show.
What station was he on?
On WSB.
Okay. I have to go back and check that out. That's really interesting. I said, that's a name that I definitely grew up hearing, but I probably don't know a ton about him. Jonathan Aaron wonders if Cody ever got his payback from Texas. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we know how that story resolved itself, but what a crazy situation that was. Texas people embarrassing themselves. I'm glad Georgia never acts bad in a situation like that. These other, Auburn with the water hoses, Texas with the water bottles. I'm glad that Georgia never acts bad like that. Adam J. says, big shout out from the Northwest. I think that Georgia rolls Auburn this weekend. Stockton puts up 3 more touchdowns by himself. Adam, I love that. That's great. I love that. Drew Odom says that Jared Curtis got a big game tonight against another undefeated team. That's fun to think about. I appreciate that. Oh, yeah, but speaking of old, now I do have a little bit of a memory of this. Georgia on Tap, which Georgia on Tap won a couple of golden shoes yesterday, mentions Leonard Losers. This to me is a good premise. So what he would do is, it was a segment, right? It's like I think it's like a syndicated radio segment where you could pay for it. And he would come on and everybody else is picking winners. Leonard's Losers was picking the loser, which is just a good premise. What I don't know, obviously in the, older, more genteel South, was he picking these games against the spread? Obviously back then, sports wagering would have only been legalized in Nevada, but let's face it, there were a lot of things happening in the South that weren't always legal. Was Leonard's Losers picking his losers against the spread? because I remember hearing him say, we had a cadence at the end where he'd go, Leonard's loser, Auburn. He'd say something along those lines. But was he picking those against the spread? Because I can tell you right now, I mean, I had vague awareness of this. So, like back in the day, if you go to like the local meet and three or something like that, they would do the cards. And this was a big deal. And you talk about like the closest we probably had in, rural Northeast Georgia to like organized crime, a criminal underbelly, was whoever it was that got to run the card. And like I said, I was a kid, so I only vaguely knew about this, but there was evidence. You could see evidence. And so back then, and by the way, that was easy money for whoever's producing the card, because it wasn't like you could go FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever on the app. The point spread was whatever you said it was. That you had full authority, maximum freedom to juice Georgia, to do whatever you wanted to. And I don't care what the line moved like during the week. Whatever the card said is what the line was. And so people are trying to do well on their cards. And like I said, there were, gas stations and meet and threes and places like that, that, you get the card and you could fill out the card and you could try to win. So, I mean, there was even in like rural Northeast Georgia, there was some awareness of point spreads. But I don't know if Leonard's Losers was picking games against the spread or not. So Derek Smith says they were against the spread. So there you go. There you go. Thank you for telling me that. All right, let's do a few more. Tyler Puglisi told a good story. Let's see if I can find it. By the way, Gary Roach tonight. See you at River Ridge. Looking forward to that, Gary. Appreciate that. Foster Moss says, don't you kind of wish that Gus Malzahn was still at Auburn to have some bulletin board material? Yeah, I do. And I would say that one of the bigger upsets we probably had is the fact that Hugh Freeze just hasn't given us much, has he? Freeze has just not given us a lot of bulletin board material. He's very contrite right now. He's been weird in years past. But Freeze is this like cartoon character, and he hasn't quite done that, at least I would say for the most part. Well, let me go to DawgNation.com. We're getting ready to bounce out of here. So DT says Leonard's Loser was actually a full hour show. I didn't know that. I thought it was just like a syndicated segment. I didn't know it was a full hour. And he says it would come on before the Georgia game. I do have some memory of like driving down the road and hearing it on Saturdays, but I don't think I knew it was a full hour. Ken Holcomb also mentioning some of the great Louis Grizzard books. Yeah, my grandfather used to read a lot of those. And I would read some of them. And like some of the jokes I would get, some of them were kind of over my head, but definitely just really appreciate, I don't know, all of that just makes me feel warm because it takes me back to, I don't know, it was always kind of nice back when you didn't know everything, when you were young and innocent, naive, and you just assumed that the adults knew everything that needed to be known. And, you're reading some of this Louis Grizzard book, you don't really get it all, but you just sort of assume the adults knew what needed to be known. It's just such a nice thing to go back and think about. SEM Dog says it was his understanding that Leonard would predict his own point spread in the local version of his show, but the syndicated version didn't mention points. Leonard's Loser, Auburn by 6. Okay, so you also had a version of that on, like, when Jimmy the Greek was on NFL Today on CBS, and even in my lifetime, because I'm a little young for Jimmy the Greek, barely remember that. But in my lifetime, Chris Berman was really the first one to do a lot of point spread stuff. And his way of getting to it is that when he was making his picks, he would just pick the winner. But the graphic that they would put on screen, this would be in the 90s, the graphic that they would put on screen is if, let's say, Buffalo's playing San Francisco. And if San Francisco wins, but Buffalo was Berman's pick to cover, the arrow would point to the losing team. Berman wouldn't reference it always. He'd say something along the lines of what, and really Lee Corso used to do a version of this too, closer than the experts think. That was a signal underdog is going to cover. So Berman would do a version of that, but back then you had to be very, very careful. It's weird to think now that, I mean, they can't promote gambling loud enough. But back then you had to be very careful. And I would say that only slightly aware of Jimmy the Greek, barely remember that. But Berman was doing some point spread picks, but had to be very careful how he would do them. Al Michaels would do a little bit of a talk around on some of that kind of stuff too. Thomas T-Bone asking about the Major League Baseball playoffs. Yeah, you know what, Thomas? I've actually watched a good bit. Watched L.A., Philadelphia last night. I watched Chicago and Milwaukee till I fell asleep. And that's what I ended up doing. I mean, I watch these games. I'll eventually fall asleep. So I'm certainly not, Buster Olney here watching every pitch, but I'm watching a pretty good bit. I think they've really been fun. I was telling some guys last week, I think the Major League playoffs are kind of back. I think they're back. I think the baseball playoffs have felt pretty big this year. I think they've been pretty good. Senior Dog says he's pulling for the Mariners and Emerson Hancock. I kind of like the Mariners too. I do. I kind of like the Mariners too. All right, I got to pull up and stop here. Speaking of a game we mentioned earlier, and speaking of making picks, now we don't shy away from picking our games against the spread. You want more thoughts on Oregon and Indiana? The big game, plus some bets a little bit deeper down the board. Hey, your mileage may vary about how much you want to follow our advice on this, but it's fun nonetheless. It's a little taste of what you get on Go with the Flow during the week. Our thoughts, most of the Dog Nation team, plus Dari Payer from R.S. Andrews, Oregon, Indiana. Let's give you that right now. Hello, DawgNation Daily and R.S. Andrews Cool Down viewers. Welcome into this edition of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. As our Friday tradition has been, a little bit of a taste of Go with the Flow presented by R.S. Andrews when we look at the big games in the week from a point spread perspective. If you want our official pick for Georgia-Auburn, Alabama traveling to Missouri, Florida traveling to Texas A&M, and of course the Red River shootout between Oklahoma and Texas, that's all available for you on the Dog Nation video channels right now. We drop that show now on Wednesdays. We hope you'll tune in and check it out. But to give you a little taste of what it's all about, we also save a game, and it's usually a big one, to pick during this space too. And this one, certainly from a ranked perspective, is a big one indeed, as Indiana still riding high, blowout win against Illinois a couple of weeks ago, fresh off a college football playoff appearance in 2024, has a big step up in weight class, traveling out to the Pacific Northwest and going on the road against Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, with Dante Moore getting on love for the Heisman Trophy right now. Oregon taking care of business, undefeated at home against the spread here thus far this season. Indiana 5-0 once again, not perfect though against the number, although certainly no level of competition for Indiana similar to what it's about to face by way of Oregon. The number we're going with is 7.5 here. Oregon favored in Eugene. Mike Griffith, we begin with you. What do you want to do with Oregon and Indiana?
The line looks foul to me, Brandon. I believe Oregon opened as a 14-point favorite, and it's all the way down to 7.5. I don't see enough from Indiana. I know they blew out Brett Bielema in Illinois, but Eugene, Oregon, I've been out there to Autzen Stadium, and it's legit. It's a hard place to play. The acoustics are such that the sound reverberates off that roof that overhangs the field. I think the Ducks are going to win this game and cover.
Mike on the side of Oregon. Jeff Sentell, what about you?
I'm a little scared, guys. This is kind of like Stranger Things happening right now. Exhibit A, we rarely see a Mike, Jeff, Connor sweep. Rarely see that. And then also, we never pick Oregon without Mike making a duck joke. So both of these
he
things
said the line was
happened.
No, he said the line was foul.
He made one.
He said the line was foul. Yeah, he said the
It
line was
very
foul.
funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, excuse me. So that restores the order to the universe a little bit. When you look at this game, I think it's going to be one of the more entertaining games of the weekend, especially from NFL scouting circles. A lot of the mock drafts right now have Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza as the top two mocked quarterbacks first round to the 2026 NFL draft. I think that's interesting. I just don't think Indiana has a really good football team, especially not the football team that can hang with the Ducks in Oregon. Give me Oregon in this one, but I see a lot of points coming.
So both of our scribes on the side of the Ducks here right now. Connor, how about for you?
I can't stand the cowardly Kurt Cignetti, and what's going to happen here is they're going to backdoor cover this to make it look like a closer game. They're going to have no interest at all ever at any point winning this game, just trying to play it close and look as impressive as it can. and he's going to find a way to do it. And this is, it's an emotional hedge because if Indiana keeps this close, then I'm right. And if Indiana loses by more than a touchdown and a half, that means Kurt Cignetti's a loser. And so give me Indiana here plus 7.5.
Not to tip off my own pick, but that factors heavily into what I'm thinking about this game, too. I think there's nothing more dangerous than a coach who knows he can't win when the spread is involved. But I'll give you more thoughts in a moment. Instead, let me let Kaylee Manziel share her thoughts on this game.
There were two, not that I needed that much selling on this game. I was probably going to take Oregon anyway, but there were two numbers that sold me on this. Number one, under Cignetti, they are just 1-6 against the spread coming out of the bye week, but this was really the one that got me. Indiana is one of 8 teams in the nation to allow points on every opponent red zone visit. So anytime other teams have gotten to the red zone, they've scored. That's enough for me to confidently take the Ducks.
So a lot of love for Oregon here right now. Just to balance this out for a moment, I do have to confess that I never would have imagined that Indiana would have beaten Illinois a couple of weeks ago as badly as it did. So while I have been very loud in saying that Indiana over the course of the last couple of seasons is a total paper tiger and a complete, fabrication, the truth is the way in which they blew out Illinois was a little shocking. So clearly better this year than I gave him credit for, and Fernando Mendoza is turning out to be a major acquisition for them, the quarterback position. Just to be fair, let me make sure I mention that. But to piggyback off what Connor was saying a moment ago, I do think coaches know the truth. They'll all act like they're always trying to win, and they are going to go out there and give it their best shot. But when a coach knows his team can't win the game, that factors heavily into the way he calls the game. I think in the case for Cignetti, that's also true on Saturday. Two things. A, he knows he can't win. B, he knows he doesn't really need to win because you don't have to win at Oregon to make the college football playoff. There are enough easy wins to still be had on the Indiana schedule, even if it doesn't take care of business here. So just playing close might be enough. I would say he's also rightly a little bit afraid of Dan Lanning, because Dan Lanning finds sources of motivation in games like this. And if I had to guess, I don't know for a fact, but if I had to guess, Dan Lanning may be just as annoyed by Kirk Cignetti as a lot of other people are. If you had a chance to put him in his place, he might want to do so. So I could see Cignetti coaching in such a way that is just less likely. If Oregon has a chance to blow Indiana out, it may want to. Cignetti may coach in such a way that keeps that from happening. Pace of play is the easiest way to prevent that. Just going a little slower than you sometimes do, and just trying to control the clock a little more than you often might. And yet, even with that said, I think Oregon right now looks like a very good team. And even if Cignetti's trying to keep his foot on the brake pedal a bit, I still think Oregon probably covers. I don't feel great about this, but the line is at least at a point where I'm going to take Oregon, but I am on guard for a little bit of a four-corner style attack from Indiana in a game they should rightly assume they have very little chance of winning. That puts the flow on the side of Oregon. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Ducks?
I mean, my gut says take Oregon. They're at home. I think they don't have much left on the schedule past this. But my heart leans Hoosiers. And, I would want this to be a close game. I think it has all the makings to be a close game. I would love for Cignetti to get a signature upset win on the road. So I will take Indiana Hoosiers in this game. And I may, just for fun, could be pissing money away, but I will sprinkle money line in some parlays with IU winning outright on the road.
So the most surprising thing I'm hearing, Dar, do you like Kirk Cignetti? You like him?
I do. He's confident.
He is confident.
He's done well where he's at. I mean, what more can you want? Some people don't like it. Well, then go beat him on the field.
No, that's a fair point indeed. That is indeed the case on that. A pretty fun game coming out of the Big Ten. There's also a ranked game involving Illinois and Ohio State. We aren't picking that officially, but it's certainly open for best bets. Anybody to take it if they'd like it. And speaking of that, we'll expand our horizons here. We'll go a little deeper down the board. Mike Griffith, will come back to you. Do you see a best bet or two that you like for the upcoming weekend?
Yeah, TCU's at Kansas State. I don't really love road favorites, but the fact that the spread has dropped and there's money going on Kansas State is a bit surprising to me. I think TCU is a contender. I like Sonny Dykes. Give me the Horned Frogs to cover a 1.5-point spread in Manhattan, Kansas.
So Mike going to the Big 12 for a best bet. Jeff Sentell, how about for you?
I got two. One, I like Virginia Tech this week on Bobby Dodd getting 14.5. I believe I've seen. I think Georgia Tech is going to win a lot of games. They might even be unbeaten, but I think they're going to struggle through this part of the schedule. There's always like a banana peel game for them. The other game I want to go on a limb for is I think Michigan continues to get better as their young players on offense get better as the more they put the ball in the belly of Justice Haynes. I see they're a 2.5-point underdog at USC this weekend. Comparable teams, it looks like, but right now with what they've shown. But I think Michigan's going to keep getting better and better. So I like the Wolverines in that one.
Connor, how about some best bets for you?
Yeah, I've got three for you this week. Gave you a winner last week in Maryland. The over-under in the Army-Air Force game, unfortunately, was not a great pick. But maybe even against my better judgment. But I'm going to go full Mike Griffith here and take some big favorites to cover. SMU against Stanford. SMU is a 19.5-point favorite. The interesting thing about this game, aside from Stanford being, I think, one of the worst teams in Power 4, this game is being played at 12 o'clock Eastern time. That is 9 o'clock in Palo Alto. This game is being played in Dallas. SMU hasn't had the season they wanted to, but I think that they're going to be up for this game, and they're going to do just enough to cover that spread. Staying in the ACC, I've got Clemson going on the road and covering a 14-point spread against Boston College. I think this Boston College team is in a bad spot right now, and I think Clemson is going to take advantage of them. Clemson covered with ease on the road last week at North Carolina. Now, North Carolina and Boston College are a little bit different situations there, but I think that is worth following there as well. And then as I pull up the official number here, Iowa, Wisconsin. I believe this is a trophy game. I do not recall which one off the top of my head it is. I want to say, is it the Floyd of Rosedale?
I was wondering if it's the Floyd of Rosedale, yeah.
Floyd of Rosedale. The over-under in this game, where both teams could well be playing with backup quarterbacks, I have it at 36. Just a principal play here. Iowa, Wisconsin, backup quarterbacks involved. Give me under 36 in this game, along with SMU minus 19.5 and Clemson minus 14.
Fact check, it's Iowa, Minnesota that play for the Floyd of Rosedale, the Big Pig Trophy. So let's make sure we get the agrarian-themed trophies right. So not the Floyd of Rosedale for this one, but good picks nonetheless. Kaylee Manziel, how about for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling pretty good in this spot. I usually don't, but after fading Brandon and Connor's pick last week and actually getting it right, I feel like I've got some momentum in this.
What did you fade on me last week?
I think it was Michigan and Wisconsin. You
Michigan,
guys both took
Michigan covered that.
I didn't take Michigan, Wisconsin.
I took Michigan. Michigan covered.
Are we sure about that?
I think Michigan
I'm
covered.
very sure about that.
I took Michigan. I think Michigan
Washington.
covered.
No, Wisconsin covered.
I don't think so. But either way.
I'll go back and look, but I feel pretty good about this. I like BYU as a 1.5-point favorite going to Arizona, and just looking at some of the stats from this conference, they both have pretty good passing defenses. And so what I think it comes down to is ultimately who has the better rushing attack at this point in the season. That's BYU. So I'll take them as 1.5-point favorites.
So total confession for our regular picks, as you see on Go With The Flow, we do keep records on that. Kaylee does a good job of doing that. That's all audited by Deloitte and all that kind of stuff. So we're very, very buttoned up when it comes to that. For our best bets, we're kind of on the honor system. And so now listen, I would rather die than lie. But I did have myself as 2-0 last week with Michigan as a cover because it was a rare winning week for me when it comes to the best bet. So hopefully I'm
17.5-point spread.
Was it 17 and a half?
They won 24-10.
Yeah, so if it's 17 and a half, they did not cover.
They did not cover.
Yeah, they did not cover. I had the spread more narrow on that. So once again, 1-1 on my best bets. Kaylee, I'll apologize for doubting you. You were clearly right on that. Either way, 1-1 again, which is I can't seem to break out of that when it comes to best bets. I am going to give you 2 this week at this point in time. You'd be fair not to care. I'm going to give you 1 on Friday, like a road team getting points with the Mean Green of North Texas hosting South Florida. Tough spot there. North Texas undefeated on the season, quietly one of the better teams in the American Athletic Conference here this year. Could be a tough spot for South Florida that's already gotten some attention early this season. But, boy, going on the road, conference play, never easy. Give me North Texas plus 1.5. That is a Friday night game. And speaking of travel and speaking of feeling good about yourself, last week, no better accomplishment than UCLA. Hadn't led for a moment in a game all season, got the win against the heavy favorite Penn State. Jerry Neuheisel, new offensive coordinator, carried off the field. Nico Imaleva getting a chance to rewrite his story after obviously what has been a pretty rough few months for him. And boy, you're feeling great. Now all you got to do is travel halfway across the continental landmass for another early start. Michigan State 0-2 in league play, first conference home game. Spartans getting 8.5, 8.5, given that here. I like Michigan State minus the 8.5 against UCLA. Long trip for UCLA. Give me Sparty minus the 8.5 here. I like the Spartans here. That's another best bet for me there in that spot. Dari Pero, how about for you?
Yeah, I feel like I should be in the penalty box this week for putting or recommending anybody to take James Franklin and the embarrassment that he did going across the country and losing to a dumpster fire of a program with UCLA. So, like, as accountability, I will not make any best bet picks this week. I will regroup and come back next week.
Well, Dari, I'll tell you this.
No longer put any more money on James Franklin.
I'll tell you what's even worse than that. You know, last week, Connor and I were kind of teaming up together. We're trying to find a two-team teaser to match with Texas, which I thought was a free spot. They're at least going to win against Florida. And we were trying to figure out, is it Cal hosting Duke? Is it Louisville against whoever it was they were playing? I think we lost all three legs. Yeah, just completely bludgeoned. Yeah, Virginia got the win against Louisville. Duke, I mean, Cal was never competitive against Duke, and then obviously Texas was essentially non-competitive against Florida, so we lost all three legs. So between me forgetting the spread for the Michigan-Wisconsin game, my teaser blew up, the UCLA debacle against Penn State, the best bets, they can only go up from here, right?
They're tough.
All right, good stuff. Hey, thanks everybody for being a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. By the way, if you want more picks, check out Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. And with that, we'll get you back to the Cool Down and get you ready for a fun football weekend.
Go Dogs.
Oh, and by the way, for those of you who ever wanted us to go almost into noon, unplanned, that's basically what we've ended up doing here. So good stuff from Dari, the entire DawgNation team, and our Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Hope you have a great weekend. See you tonight, high school football, Peachtree Sports Network, Atlanta News First for Sprayberry and River Ridge. Big day of coverage tomorrow. Kaylee's got your pregame. I'll see you on the field for the postgame show, talking about what we hope is a Georgia win against Auburn. Then, of course, back here Monday as well. So check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. Get ready for the upcoming winter by getting your heating system tuned up to factory fresh specs. Keep it warm and toasty all winter long. That's going to be here before you know it. And then back here Monday, DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Have a great weekend, everybody.